It's so funny. You can Facebook Live stream as well, but you need more than 100 followers, and we have 35.
On Facebook.
We're not hitting the threshold.
Just a bunch of moms on Facebook.
3 people watching. I'm gonna pull up the chat. Let's hear some chat. I better see Speedy in there. Let some people trickle in.
7 people. And I guarantee you, MBS is going to be on this. He's going to look for faces, taking names.
Better not be planning any embassy visits anytime soon. Facebook is not dead. I'll tell you something, John. I know someone who makes basically $1,000 a day from Facebook Shorts. It is such an overlooked opportunity in the creator space. Very few creators know about it. If you look at all the big ones, they're all posting on Facebook every day because they're monetizing on Facebook now.
That's what there's those movie clips that you get on YouTube. It's like this like off-brand Netflix for people who can't get work at Netflix. They like make these really hokey like
Mon Studios kind of.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. Well, like they'll be like, oh, a homeless guy happens to be a billionaire and he's pretending to be homeless and working outside the Starbucks, falls in love with the barista, and her husband cheats on. Like it's so hokey, and I'm like, how do people watch this shit?
Facebook is a boomer platform. Like the boomers love Facebook. It is the go-to platform for them. Okay, we have 11 people, 2 minutes in. I'm sure it'll trickle up. Let's should we just get started?
Sure. Yeah, and hopefully it trickles up, and if it doesn't, maybe Thursday's the wrong time, but we will find out.
Okay. Well, how do you want to start it off? Which topic?
Well, I'm easy, but we can start off with Saudi Arabia, or Middle East, given it's top of mind. So the first thing we want to talk about is Trump's trip to the Gulf states. So Middle East, Qatar, and the UAE. So I think everyone saw Trump, announced and claimed there was $2 trillion of deals done on his trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. There wasn't TLDR. There wasn't $2 trillion of deals. Let me just make that clear up front. But headline, it was still a positive trip. So to break it down for those who aren't aware and don't read this boring stuff, and Cam, if you want, you can share that BBC article on the screen if people want to see it. But basically, these are partnerships, right? And these aren't even commitments. They're not like inked in paper of Saudi's going to spend this much, UAE is going to spend this much. This is pretty much like most of it's soft commitments, and a lot of it is old. Like it was announced a month ago. But Saudi Arabia, I think it's like $600 billion in partnerships. UAE is, I think, a few hundred billion, and then Qatar, according to Trump, is like $1.2 trillion. Now, in reality, what actually happened is with Saudi, the big, most real thing is they're going to purchase a bunch of stuff from Boeing. It's like $100-something billion. On top of that, they're going to do a lot of partnerships with Saudi Arabia related to AI. So helping them set up AI zones, chips, Amazon setting something up there, Google setting something up there. The same thing applies for UAE. They're going to set up the biggest like AI hub outside of the United States there. And then with Qatar, it was like the plane and a bunch of other random little things. It wasn't $2 trillion. This is soft commitments, probably going to happen over a period of 5+ years. Last time Trump did this, I think he announced $400 billion, but in reality, it was like $300 billion. But overall, it is actually something positive. It's going in the right direction in that they're partnering with the Middle East and trying to create economic alliances. Yeah, I'll pause there, and then I have some other thoughts. But what did you guys think?
I thought it was like vintage Trump, right? I mean, the whole diplomacy as deal making, president as deal maker in chief, right? That's kind of, it's telling that he chooses it as his first visit again of his second administration. He did it the first time for the first one. I think it's very much in his style, right? He goes there, shakes hands at MBS. He brings. I think it was like Zuckerberg, Musk was there. Who else? Like Sam Altman was there. They had like the whole like squad of like their tech billionaires. So like, I think the optics are just like very, very, very appealing to Trump. And like, I think his kind of perspective on this is like, I think like on both sides, right? There's an incentive to upsell this, right? I think MBS loves to sort of shake hands with Trump and have the massive
Yeah.
image of him with the big man, and Trump loves to be able to like pull out like random fact-free numbers about deal sizes because it makes him look like the deal maker in chief. So it's very much part of this like transactional diplomacy. I don't want to say Trump has a consistent foreign policy worldview, but if there was anything consistent, it is like this kind of like diplomacy as deals.
Yeah. You know what? There was so his numbers are always wrong. I don't know if he does that on purpose. I don't want to give him that much credit, but his numbers are always wrong. He always says they're bigger, but you know what? Politically, it works. Like it's kind of crazy, but it works. No one fact checks this stuff. The one, I think the biggest thing, and it's not being talked about enough, the biggest thing that happened, in my view, was getting rid of Biden's sanctions on the chips. Yeah. That is actually like, I don't know why it wasn't talked about more, but that was really the biggest thing that happened, because previously, you know how like Biden and, if they had their reasons, they didn't want chips going to places like China, AI chips, that is. Saudi was on that list. So were most of the Gulf states. They're no longer on that list. Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia can buy these chips directly from NVIDIA.
Wait, what was it? All of them? I thought it was just UAE that got lifted off.
Was it just no? Saudi couldn't buy them either because they were really pissed off because they wanted to do a lot of stuff through PIF related to AI, but they weren't able to. And so, but the big package, the big sale is to UAE, the partnership with NVIDIA. But now all of them can invest in all of this. And, there's a comment in here about, actually, no, I misread that comment. But like, what's the position? Do you do deals with autocrats, or do you not do deals with autocrats? And I think there's no clean answer, but it's probably
well.
Better
I think a few of my thoughts. Well, number one, with the doing deals with autocrats and authoritarian regimes, it seems that Biden was on the complete other end of the spectrum with this, and then Trump is on the other end of the spectrum, and no one wants to meet in the middle. But Trump, I forget what the technical term is, but his version of diplomacy is we do deals with everyone as long as they're benefiting the U.S. Like it does not matter. The one thing I found interesting was them lifting sanctions off of Syria.
Which big win for Saudi.
We don't even know. I think his name is Shara, but we don't even know. Yeah, we don't even know whether he will actually,
Wait, is that his new name or is that his old name? Because I know he renamed.
He was called Al-Jalani before.
Yeah, like that's so crazy that people can just do that. Like, just have a new fucking name. Like, Donald Trump could come on the second presidency and call himself the Redeemer. Like that's literally what this guy did.
Yeah. But this guy had a $10 million US bounty on his head like 2 months ago.
I know.
Now meeting Trump and has sanctions off. It's like huge win for Syria. Huge win for Saudi.
He's still on the U.S. terror watch list. Like he's still on. Yeah, he was with Al Qaeda. He was with ISIS. Like it really is shocking that one. I think the Syrian people will probably be very, very angry that he is working with the states or the West in some capacity. Or two, this is actually something that is like transformational and will shift a new Syria. I lean more towards that the Syrian people get upset and more civil strife occurs. But I mean, Andrew, you seem to have a good grasp on it. What do you think?
I feel the latter actually. I think ultimately like this is the only way for Syria to become a kind of like semi-normal part of the global economy, right? It's been so cut off for 13 years since the Arab Spring started, maybe more than that. And the country's been like completely run into the ground. So like I feel at this point, like, and also I don't know if it has enough of a like cohesive sense of national identity to kind of have that sort of like strong
That's a really good
anti-Western
point.
kind of thing. It's just, but I think at that point you're just focused on like what's going to get us back on our feet economically, right? And lifting US sanctions is huge.
Yeah, I think the like this whole idea of diplomacy that the United States has kind of been, or not diplomacy, the effort that they've had in the Middle East of basically bombing their way to democracy does not work. Like, yeah, I think you can't have forced cultural change unless you do something extreme. Like, I'm not proposing this, but like, unless you nuke a place, you can't change the people, right? Like, anytime you create a power vacuum, someone else fills it in, because as much as they're your allies in the moment, principally their views are very different in how they want to run their country. So what do? You let them run the country the way that they want, and you trade with them, and over time they'll get more educated and maybe they'll change their position a little bit. And that's how you monitor it. Like, there's no benefit of making Syria your enemy right now. And it's, if I was to draw, like, compare it to what the US did with Russia following the end of the Cold War, how they continue to expand, and not just US, Europe continue to expand NAFTA. They should stop that sort of policy. like
Yeah.
if you really don't want someone to be your enemy, treat them like they're not your enemy. Like, be thoughtful, like, protect yourself, but don't treat them like your enemy, because then they'll become your enemy.
Well, isn't Syria also kind of, like I don't want to say satellite state, but a proxy for Turkey at
It
this
is, yeah.
point?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Erdogan was one of the major levers that got that deal through. I think it's interesting as well because Israel, like they are essentially not angry in Israel, but Israel does want the demilitarization of South Syria. And if they go through with this deal, I know Senator Lindsey Graham said something about this, but if they go through with this deal and Syria isn't forced to demilitarize, like, it probably will create a lot of tensions with Israel. But I think tensions with Israel are high everywhere across the board.
Maybe we avoid the Israel topic, but
Oh yeah, we don't have
but
to talk about that. But
yeah.
I mean, it
One thing
just
I'll
matters
say,
for diplomacy.
yeah, one thing I'll say, obviously the video that we made like paints Saudi in a really bad picture. But here's something to keep in mind. If I was to be a betting man and to bet on the future of Saudi versus the UK versus Canada, versus these countries, I would take Saudi. And I know people are going to be surprised with me saying that, but there's a really simple reason. Saudi Arabia is, like, yes, they're running into some deficit issues, but their countries run pretty well. Their debt level is like 20 to 30%. Their deficit, it's because they're spending a crap ton on NEOM. So, they could turn it off immediately and they'll be fine. They are making a lot of progress and trying to get AI. So even though NEOM might not work, they might still get AI investment, tech investment. And they happen to have the greatest business in human history, which is free flowing oil and gas. And that's probably still going to be around for the next 10, 20, 30 years at least in a substantial state.
Well, I,
So
I was talking to you about this. Like the price that they're running a current account deficit right now. The
yeah,
price that they need to not be in a deficit anymore is essentially 110 to 115, I think.
yeah,
Um, like you said, they have so much command and dominance over oil because the way their oil functions is literally right beneath the sand. They can turn off those wells right away. Like
yeah.
in Alberta, you got 50,000 people going down there trying to get it out, and then no one wants to buy
Yeah.
it.
Well, and
Like,
it's the best oil in the world. And with OPEC, like Kazakhstan, and I forget the other country, but like they obviously broke, from the reins
Yeah.
of lowering supply so that they could increase price. That pissed off Saudi. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but Saudi Arabia literally came in and was like at the last OPEC meeting, saying we're going to increase production to punish the people that broke away, because
Yeah.
they know they can handle a little bit of fiscal strain. It's like theirs is very it's momentary, right? They don't have shit ton of debt that they need to service. If they want to stop spending, they can stop spending. They're fine. Well, other countries aren't. So I mean, Saudi Arabia, like they have a lot of ammo in the chamber.
Yeah, I
should we
think the
move
other
on or?
interesting part of the whole thing is, and I don't want to get too into Israel here, but it's interesting that I think what does, aside from deals and like AI investment and the kind of broader optics of meeting Trump in the gold-plated palace, like what do they materially and diplomatically get out of it? And I think it seems, and there's no like firm reporting on this, but it seems to be that they want some kind of Trump deal in Iran. Basically, that the Saudis decided that having an outright conflict with Iran is like not in their interest. You know, for example, having the Houthis, the Iranian proxies, bombing their oil wells is not actually in Vision 2030 interest. And so, as a result, they've decided in 2023 they normalized relations with Iran in this China-backed deal, and then now they're pushing Trump to do some kind of like nuclear deal where Iran gives up its like military nuclear ambitions in exchange for some like monitored civilian nuclear deal. So that's kind of, it seems to be that's the kind of like diplomatic back channeling that's going on behind this. So it'll be interesting to see if in the next few months Trump like leans more towards some kind of like Iran containment deal after Saudi Qatari pressure.
Yeah, honestly, that's a really good point. That whole, I mean, and I read somewhere something somewhere where Israel might be preparing to attack Iran. So like this whole thing could change like within an instant. And so, yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens. But I think overall, like with the Sunni League, if you will, and then Qatar, although like, Saudi doesn't like Qatar very much, but those three major nations out there, like some positive movements, and I think they'll be pretty stable. And Syria is a potential positive as well. So, I mean, as much as Trump, I want, when I poo-poo on Trump here, I think the trip was generally pretty positive.
I agree. Should we get to the tax bill?
Yeah.
I think this is wild. I came into this like reading and researched about this, that they wouldn't sign it, but they signed it in the House at least this morning or afternoon. But both of you interject as much as you need to. But essentially, in 2017, everyone's quite familiar with the tax bill then. That tax bill, made a lot of changes to one, SALT, state and local income taxes. It used to be unlimited. They capped it to $10,000. This is for your tax deductions for the year. They also changed or slashed corporate tax rates, a bunch of different individual tax rates. There was a lot of stuff, but it was always temporary. That was going to always end in 2025, December 2025 to be exact. So right now, there's a lot of different, I guess, influences or parties that are shaping up this tax bill as it heads to the Senate. The first one is I think it's called House Freedom Caucus or Freedom House Caucus, just far right conservatives that essentially want to stop the Biden era climate tax credits, and they want to significantly, or I wouldn't say cancel, but they want to adjust Medicaid requirements so that people, when they get Medicaid, they have to work a certain amount of hours. I think it's 20 per week. But one of the crazier things is they're going to raise SALT to 40% because a lot of these Republican states, blue Republican states where their vote is needed, want them to raise it because they're probably going to lose in the midterm election. So there's a lot of different like confluences right now. And I think it was just like extremely interesting. There's a lot of different things we can talk about, but that's just like the general overview. Like they're going to curtail food stamps. They're going to do the Medicaid work requirements. There's endowment tax increases from 1.4% to around 21%. There's going to be a remittance tax on money sent abroad. Like there's a ton of different stuff in here, but like the most important thing is it's going to destroy the deficit. They are going to put themselves in a much, much worse position. I think it's going to balloon to 125% as a result of this. And then the worst, result of this is that the yields went up to 5% again, essentially signaling, or investors, bond market is signaling that they don't want to invest in the US as much as they did anymore. And they need a risk premium to justify it. So it is very realistic that in the next 5 to 10 years, the amount of money going into U.S. Treasuries or the credit worthiness or credit, or rather the investment grade of the U.S. declines.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's super, and it obviously like it continues like what we've seen already regarding like the dual sell-off in like treasuries and the dollar at the same time, right? It's just like broad, and I think we got into it a little bit in the video. Maybe before I need to follow up on it again because it's such a big topic, but like there's it's the second step, right, in Trump kind of puncturing this notion of the US as being this bulletproof safe haven asset. I think on the Medicaid thing is like super interesting because like I think there's this interesting like rift in the Republican Party between like the MAGA, like this. I think Steve Bannon was talking about this. He's like, most of MAGA is on Medicaid, right? So like you have these like working class, like we use the cliche like working class, non-college educated whites who are probably in who are probably like relatively low income, who are dependent on Medicaid, and so there's this kind of tension between the kind of tax cut libertarianism, gut Medicaid, conventional kind of like small state like republicanism versus this like MAGA, this kind of like populist policy, which in a way Trump's base kind of depends on these kind of government handouts, right? So it'll be really interesting to see. I think the CBO projected that as a result of these cuts to Medicaid, the poorest households would be 2% worse off in disposable income by 2027, and the richest would be 4% better off by 2027. So it's weird that you have this sort of like working class MAGA base that's ultimately getting a policy that's hugely preferable to the wealthy elite.
Well, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, I mean, I like I don't like Steve Bannon's views, but he's pretty consistent in that he really only cares about the working class. And I think it's come up tons of times where everything he talks about is about the working class. And yeah, there is this complete deviation that you see there. And from what I understand, they didn't even lower military spending. Like I don't exactly remember how much
they
cut
increased it. I
They
think.
increased
they
it, border and
increased it.
military.
Yeah. So like, I mean, that's crazy to me. Like, especially because now you have these technologists in the White House, whispering in Trump's ear, who've been talking about we don't need to be building these giant ships and these incredibly expensive fighter jets. We can be using modern technology like Anduril, but they're still, for some reason, spending more, even though we've seen on the ground in Ukraine and Russia that modern technology is far superior in every regard, but they're still going to increase spending. One thing I'll say just to Mr. Krobe, I don't know how to say your name properly, but to your comment about the Moody's downgrade, that actually means very little. So like to that's my view at least. The other credit agencies have both or had already downgraded the US, and I think it was 2013 and I think it was 2021. And this is the second highest rating that you can get. And because the US is the world reserve currency, Moody's lowering it to the second tier, in my opinion at least, is going to make zero difference whatsoever. That's my take.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another third party credit agency. I don't know. They didn't mention it in the article, but they also downgraded. The downgrading doesn't affect the institutions that are buying treasuries. I do think though that it was baked in already. People were already shifting away. The credit worthiness is kind of like a lagging indicator. I think Besant says something similar, but there's like a ton of interesting stuff we can talk about with this. But like in my view, I think the Medicaid food stamps like requirements of making them work 20 hours a week is actually good. The reason why they're partially doing this is with Medicaid, they're going to run out of funding for Medicaid in I think 5 to 10 years. So I think they're hoping that states and their dependents, they're ineligible or they can't get Medicaid anymore and they can lower their servicing to Medicaid over time, which is like an interesting dynamic because it's going to destroy a lot of his base who's probably on Medicaid and SNAP. Yeah, it's just kind of wild. Like I think it's very, very different from 2017. Like how 2017 was very clear in its mandate, but now it's clear to me that he doesn't have control of them and he's having to make all these side deals with 4 Republicans just to secure
none
their
of it
vote.
makes sense. Like it's all be like this is the fundamental problem with democracy. I'm not saying we should go to an autocratic regime. I'm not proposing going to a dictatorship, but the fundamental problem with democracy is either you vote to get too much money or to spend too much money, or you vote for just your specific riding, and that can skew incentives. So the reason military spending, as an example, is not being reduced is because all these military contractors are located all across the United States. And so all these Republican, we want to lower spending, They don't want to do that because it's going to lose jobs and then they're going to lose their seat. So it's just this, you have this weird, crazy agency issue, incentive issues, and then everyone keeps talking a big game. But like as David Freeberg on the Elon podcast says, when he talked to all these politicians, none of them are like ready to do anything real. You know, like, and they can do the Medicaid stuff, which impacts poor people. They're never going to go against those who donate to them, those who,
Well, they actually did.
fair.
You know, the climate, I guess, rollback that they did, you
That's
know,
true.
it affects, right? Like, it affects Elon Musk. They're replacing it with essentially, I think it was like tax deductions for the auto loan interest on cars. So it's funny to me, like, I don't like Elon's personality. I think he's
You
cringe,
said you
but
love him. Remember you said that?
hey,
You-
don't put that in the air, okay? I don't want people thinking I'm an Elon fanboy.
You messaged him to have his 20th baby.
I asked him to sponsor our channel. He said no. But anyways, he's been like destroyed, like on all fronts, because he wanted to, you know, donate to Trump. He wanted to be a major part of Doge, and all of his businesses are struggling as a result of it, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah. His like, you know, it's hard to feel bad for him. But like when you listen to him on his investor calls, he seems so sad. Like he really seems, he feels like his best friend, you know, slept with his girlfriend or something. That's what he kind of looks like.
Well,
Pour one out for long suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's just gonna have to draw down a bit more on that $1 billion credit line. It's probably more, honestly.
You know, the big picture with all of this though is like the US, the only thing that can save the US is AI, in my opinion. Frankly, like a lot of the Western world, because they're going to spend themselves into oblivion. And their debt service is going high. They're never going to lower their spending. Like there's a comment in here from Quantix. Like he's right. There is need for massive reform in entitlements. But a part of the problem is the US entitlement ecosystem and medical system in particular is deeply inefficient. If the US medical system wasn't as expensive as it is, half these problems wouldn't be here. I forget, like we did a whole video on the US medical system, and it's the least efficient medical system in the Western world, which basically means that you're spending way more for Medicare and Medicaid than you would actually need to if you had centralization. And I know, you know, oh my God, it's socialism, like, well, whatever. But like sometimes if it's cheaper, like if that's what you want, right? You're consolidating, you have leverage. The government can negotiate and create a cheaper medical system. But no, they don't want to do that. And they have this hugely disparate medical system with terrible results, extremely expensive. And the only way to fix it is to cut it so people get less medical attention, and more people are poor, more people die, and Bob's your uncle. Elon Musk is crying.
Well, before we move on to something else, I wanted to mention one thing, and I wanted to get both your thoughts on this. But did you hear about the MAGA accounts or the Trump accounts? Do you know what this is?
Oh, what, like so when if you're a baby born in the US, you get like some investment account. Like
yeah, so you get $1,000. Kind of works like a trust fund. You don't get access to it until you're 18. You don't get full access till you're 25, and you can contribute like I think $5,000 to $10,000 a year in it. But I'm like mixed on it. I think it's going to add a significant burden that does not need to be added, but at the same time, I like it because Bill Ackman's talked about this before. The idea of just giving every kid when they're born $1,000 and watching it compound over time. I'm not sure like why no one's talking about it though.
I mean, why is no one talking? I think it's just buried within the kind of like deluge of different announcements, right? But it is inherently a significant idea, right? For me, like my question around it is like I think it's an interesting idea. It's just like, you know, in the context of massive cuts, the opportunity cost is presumably quite significant, right? When you're gutting Medicaid to your main, which is going to disproportionately affect your own base. True. Like I feel like the Democratic, you know, this is another problem to. I'm on your point on democracy, like the benefits from that would be seen for like 20, 25 years, right? If you're a baby born now, 25 years time, you'll feel great that you have your like, you know, $1,000 seeded Trump account, but that doesn't, that Trump will likely not be around in 25 years. So the political dividend from that is likely quite
we should
limited.
make a bet. We should make a bet. I honestly think he's indestructible.
Every time
think he
he
can't
eats a McChicken or a McDouble or whatever he likes,
He gets stronger.
He gets stronger.
Yeah, it's I feel like they didn't talk about it 'cause it's just too complicated to understand, right? Like it's not easy to explain to people, I don't think. And then to Benjamin Dubber, in 20 years, 1,000 would buy you a loaf of bread. Yeah, it's great, honestly. And Bill Ackman, he's talked about this a lot. I'm so torn on this sort of stuff. Like it sounds super nice in principle, but it all it's going to be is inflationary because you're not actually solving the core issues. The core issues are the U.S. system is deeply, although it's great in some ways, it's very unequal, and things are getting way too expensive, and spending is out of control. And
I like to say you get the smartest people in the world, but you also get the dumbest people in the world.
It's like a bimodal distribution.
Yeah.
Honestly, it really is. The U.S. is the most bimodal. Like I used to consult, and I worked in the U.S. a lot, and it was crazy. The distribution, even at senior levels, you would talk to executives, and you'd be like, "How do you have this job? You're so clearly not intelligent." But yeah, that's the U.S. for you.
Yeah, I agree. What do we want to talk about now?
The other thing I wanted to say, just going back to bond markets and yields and that kind of thing, is, and I'll add my British perspective here in third world London, but we had a very similar experiment with this kind of hyper aggressive, trickle down economics essentially, which is kind of what I think this has been spun as. And we did Liz Truss. We had Liz Truss for 45 days in 2022, and that was very similar, right? It was very, very similar, right? Very, very aggressive cuts to the welfare state, and then this whole idea that this will all be paid for by dramatic tax, like Singapore on Thames is the cliche, right? We'll have dramatic tax cuts on corporations, the wealthy, the city. Everyone will come here and invest their money here, But the reality is sovereignty is kind of limited by the bond markets, and we've seen once already that Trump buckled because he didn't care about the stock markets when the tariffs came out, but he rolled the whole thing back. When the bond markets got yippy, he rolled the whole thing back.
Yeah.
So if over the next week or two we start to see the bond markets getting shaky and shaky and shaky, that might be the only thing that gives Trump pause for thought on whether the big beautiful bill is really that beautiful.
Yeah, man, that's such a crazy thing to think about, the power of the bond market. And the UK, which I don't know if people know, is a third world country, has a really shitty track record. But what happened again? Liz, she penciled it in, and then within a day or two,
they had a mini budget basically. So it wasn't a full budget because she was elected after this period of kind of chaos where Boris Johnson got kicked out for a number of things, but culminating in a sexual harassment scandal of an MP. He knew about it, didn't kick the guy out. Not Boris gets kicked out. They have this internal leadership contest in which like a lot of these internal primaries, right? The most extreme elements of the party turn out to vote. So you get Truss going crazy on this whole kind of Thatcherism on steroids thing. And very quickly the bond markets tank, the gilt yields surge. And I think the principal reason was that lots of UK pension funds have hold really long dated government bonds. And so when the price of those collapses, they're forced into all kinds of they're into all kinds of shit. So then at that point it kind of goes into free fall, and her credibility was destroyed. She tried to richly sacrifice her chancellor.
Remember when she didn't last longer than a head of lettuce?
That was hilarious. These politicians with their whole airy fairy idea of we're gonna get investment. What does that mean? I hate when people say that. Oh, we're gonna get all this money is coming in to do what? Why do people want to put money into the UK? What the hell does the UK have? What was she thinking? What's gonna happen?
I think it was it's going to be with some kind of paradise for finance and investment banking, basically, because the corporation tax is so low here. Every rich person in Europe will bring their money here. But the reality is that she found out that there's two things. She found out very quickly that she was A, not popularly elected, and B, very quickly checked by the bond markets. But C, more generally, trickle down economics has a terrible record in economic and like historical literature, because
Yeah.
like the reality is that never really happens. Generally speaking, like the
Well, I mean, the
rich
UK
have a
already
way lower
has.
spending rate.
That's exactly, and the UK already has this like bimodal distribution of, well, they'll have, which is London, and have-nots, which is the rest of the nation or kingdom. Like, yes, you can make it a bit more attractive for financiers, but that's already what it is. Like,
Yeah.
that's the problem. The UK has nothing beyond like capital markets, and they're losing at that too because they haven't innovated. And so all of this is being shifted to the United States, to Asia, and even like PIF, like I think they're going to have their European office in Paris and not London. Like, yeah, I mean, it just, I think it's all kind of crazy. One quick one I wanted to touch on was mythical pancakes, because I think we do have a lot of Canadians in here, but there's this whole thing about, can Canada realistic fix its housing situation in the next 4 years? I'm going to extend that. I'm going to extend that to almost every country that has a housing crisis right now. No. Like, that's the answer. The US is the only exception to this, because the US doesn't really have a housing crisis everywhere. It has it in very specific places, but Canada can't fix its housing crisis because Canada's economy is its housing crisis. Australia can't fix its housing crisis because Australia's economy is its housing crisis. Like, this is the thing that you guys got to get through to your head. Like, the reason this stuff doesn't get fixed is because if it gets fixed, older people are fucked. Like, that's the plain and simple of it. You would literally destroy the foundation of these flimsy countries. So no, it's, I'll even go further. It'll never be fixed until there's a crash. Vancouver and Toronto housing markets can't be fixed unless you let true market economics take place, which is, and other stuff, not allowing people to prevent zoning and building. You're already seeing it in the condo markets in Toronto and Vancouver. And then you saw it in Austin, Texas, right? Austin, Texas had a huge boom in home prices. And what's happened? They've all come down. Why? Because Texas basically has no zoning laws. It's like a straight Wild West. So people just started building everywhere. And now there's more supply. And as supply goes up and demand stays the same, pretty simple macroeconomics, sorry, prices go down. Simple.
That's why we call him the dictator, folks.
Well, like, yeah, my nickname should be like the Oracle of, the Dictator of Doom or something.
Should we get into Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty good segue there, because I think if you talk about like, I mean, like what I wanted to talk about, like I think we've had three pretty interesting elections in Europe, all on Sunday. And in each case, there's been this kind of, the results have been a bit mixed, but in all the cases, there's been this kind of insurgent far right candidate, and everyone's been very worried about, will the far right candidate come in and displace the kind of sensible centrist candidate? And the reason it relates, because I think that if you obviously, we talk a lot about immigration in Europe, and like why, how immigration is the animating force behind like the AFD, or like, Front National, like the National Rally as it's called now in France. But like, the reality is, like, I think a big part of it is because there's this you see a lot of young people voting for these far right parties, and that's because there's a sense of like generational like inequity, basically, where you have like rich old people who own houses, who are essentially savers, and you have like poor young people who are borrowers, who can never get on the housing ladder, have way worse economic opportunities. That gets blamed on immigration, but the reality is it's a similar thing to what you have in Canada or in Australia. It's this sense of inequity, and that has to have like a vent, and that goes out into this kind of far right politics. But yeah, I'd like to give it like a quick summary. So Romania, they had like the final round of their presidential rerun. So they had the first actual poll in December last year. And I don't know if you followed it, but they got annulled by the court there because they found out that the main guy, the leading candidate, who was this no one called Kelin Georgescu, was like the beneficiary of some like Russian like psyop via TikTok. And like, so he like came out of nowhere and won. So they're just like, nope, revoke the result. But then this time they had like a 2-round runoff. So the first round, this guy, George Simeon, who was like the far right kind of like anointee of the guy who was disqualified before, got like 41%, won the first round. But then in the second round, the kind of sensible centrist candidate who's like the mayor of Bucharest, Nicolae Dan. I can't like speak Romanian, but he won. So that was like kind of I think quite a relief for like, centrist politicians in Europe. That was kind of, I mean, I think the good thing is, I think for the sort of centrist, the kind of like sensible centrist, it's like this guy is like very pro EU, pro NATO, pro continuing aid to Ukraine, not going to kind of like become like the next Viktor Orban. But then the situation is still a bit like, we have, so Poland then on the same day, they had the first round of their presidential vote. So Poland, like the president is not like the main guy, the prime minister is. The president's kind of the head of state, but he obviously like has the ability to like impede the prime minister's agenda. So there, and I'm going to butcher the names, but there was Rafał Trzaskowski, who's the mayor of Warsaw, I think, and the sort of appointee of the current leading Donald Tusk's party, won, but like with only like he got like 31%, and then the Peace and Justice candidate got 29%, which was like a way tighter result than they expected. So and it's interesting because this guy Nawalski, who's the kind of Peace and Justice candidate, is like big Trump guy. Like Trump has personally endorsed him. He went out and said that the tariffs on Europe were the fault of the European Union, not Trump. So it's kind of the influence of it's interesting to see the different influence of Trump in that one. And then the final one was in Portugal, where they had like parliamentary elections, and you had this kind of far right party that's kind of it's made incremental gains, but it's pretty new. It's called Chega, led by this former like football commentator called Andre Ventura, and basically they came in and like got the second highest vote share after the incumbent party. So they've kind of like broken the two party duopoly in Portugal, which is interesting because people talk about. I don't know if you guys follow the podcast like The Rest is Politics. It's like a UK thing, but basically they talk a lot about like Iberian exceptionism, like Spain, Portugal haven't had far right politics, but now these guys are getting it as well. And it's like, and again, to go back to your point about housing, it's like the reason, obviously immigration is a big part of it, and immigration is kind of always the main kind of pressure valve that it comes down to. But the reality is like it's young men, low education level, like limited economic opportunity, can't get on the housing ladder, can't find a wife, all this kind of thing. The kind of like, the incel industrial complex essentially that's like fueling these angry people who go out and make racist TikTok memes and vote for these parties.
Wait, one thing I would temper on this, and I'll use like a example of a friend I know who's richer than me, and he's become very Trump leaning all of a sudden. Like my whole life my whole college career I've known this guy, hated far right politics, and all of a sudden he's making a lot more, and he's become very much into the culture wars. And I think like one of the thoughts, I'm curious to get your take on this, but if I think about Europe, it's very homogenous, right? Like excluding a couple of countries, places like Spain, places like Portugal, Poland, Romania. Maybe historically they had a lot of immigration without people knowing it. They've mixed, but it's pretty homogenous culturally, at least compared to a place like Canada or the United States. And now that they've seen a lot more immigration, and in the case of Portugal, a lot of influencers, and all of this is causing cultural division. And then, all these promises of improving lifestyles haven't really panned out. Like, I mean, we talked about Moody's downgrade. Spain and Portugal are garbage when it comes to their credit rating. We're seeing in Ireland with Conor McGregor coming out because of all the stuff related to immigrants. Like, again, maybe there's more to it, but I wonder if the reality of it is it's an economic thing, but the social element is the thing that sparks it. The social element is what gets them riled up, but the underlying thing is really economics.
I think it's a few things. Well, the first one is the incel industrial complex. I don't think people realize how many people are incels.
Are you coming out?
No, I'm not. But
everybody,
that'll be Incel International Week or whatever.
I want to go to that. That's actually called Comic-Con.
I think, yeah, but it's kind of wild to me how many people are one addicted to porn, addicted to like hating on women or saying stuff about women. That kind of culture generally aligns with right wing values, where women just generally they're not as respected as they should be, or there's a sense of hate from the candidates towards women or women who are in power. Like Hillary versus Trump. And I don't like Hillary. I'm just saying that this exists.
So
The
you
second
also
is,
hate women. Is that what you're saying? You come out as an incel,
are you
and
are
now
you
you're
gonna let
saying
me
you hate
speak, or are you just gonna try
actually
to
you hate women.
destroy my reputation online? Okay, the second thing is, your friend who makes a lot of money probably wants to also vote for, um, the right winger Trump because he lives in a city with a shit ton of homeless people, or
Exactly.
two, where a lot of immigrants are maybe near his area or coming towards his area, or in three, because he's rich and he'll probably get his tax rates lowered.
I think the main reason is really it's the it's the culture stuff. Every time I talk to him, it's the culture stuff that pisses him off. And my view on this is, and it's the same view I have for the Middle East, right? Where historically we've just thought we can force our way to cultural change. Right? There's a really good book I always talk about called The Tyranny of Experts. I believe in the value of experts, but I do not believe in the value of experts to force cultural and social change. It needs to come naturally. So when a lot of these movements are happening, and yeah, they're maybe for the good, the greater good, but they are not endurable because they piss people off because they're not ready for the change. And so if you want to play the long game, you need to be more thoughtful about not forcing it down people's throat, because otherwise you have a negative reaction to it and then it flips the other way. And then you're back 50 years, right? We saw this. We think about the Islamic Revolution that happened in Iran, right? Kind of like that. Some of the stuff we've seen in Iraq, some of the stuff we've seen in Afghanistan. Afghanistan wasn't like super Muslim, like a fundamentalist country. Then Russia started fucking with them. The U.S. started messing with them, and now they've kind of retreated. They don't trust the West, and so like all of this to say, I think it's really like I really think some of this cultural stuff, for better or for worse, it's becoming everything. You read our comments too. It's like the cultural stuff just constantly comes up, constantly.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty pessimistic view of a lot of it. The Europe stuff is interesting to me, because you'd think just generally that those elections would be more easily swayed the way the electoral systems are as well. I think it was in, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but in Romania, it was really close. They can essentially win by partnering with the far right people,
Yeah.
even further right people. So it might be the case that in Europe, where they have these mixed member type of electoral systems or coalition governments, that you start to see more right wing influence. In Canada and Australia, it's first past post, you're essentially done. But yeah, the Romania, Poland, even Portugal, like all on the same day is kind of wild that happened.
Yeah, but it's interesting also because I feel like, I mean, to bring it back to like countries we talked about before, like I think the result is much more mixed, right? In the sense that there's no like, I don't think there's a clear narrative to take out of this and say how is
Totally.
American conservatism influencing US, like European politics. Whereas if you look at Canada and Australia, it's like extremely clear, as I think we wrote about and as we talked about before, right? Like in both cases, Trump's influence totally inverted the fortunes of the previously unpopular incumbent party there. And whereas in Europe, like it's been a lot. I feel like there's less direct. Maybe it's an anglophone thing, but there's less like it doesn't cut through in the same way in like mainland Europe as it does in
Yeah.
like the former British colonies, essentially like
Well,
Australia.
I wonder if it's because like you're British, you guys have an identity. British people have a very clear identity. Canadians don't. Canadians, like, frankly, don't have an identity and they don't have a real sense of patriotism. It's almost like we are not American, right?
Yeah,
That's
well,
kind
we
of
live in igloos. We have our elbows up.
yeah.
We go to Tim Hortons for rollback rims.
No, like it's pretty, if you go to Vancouver and then you go to Seattle, almost indiscernible. Like there are different, but they're almost indiscernible, right? And so like, what is I think what really happened is it was just like this cultural almost reaction and saying like, we're not them, so we're going to do a bit different. And then also to Kamal's point, like it's that system that Canada has, first past the post. And maybe the other comment I would actually make is all of these movements are small. I think they all get overblown. I don't think they're as big as people think they are. I think the majority of people in these Western countries are still very liberal. And it's really just a matter of like, what's the word for it? I just had a brain fart. It's just a matter of the political system allowing them to win, right? Like Marie Le Pen, how everyone was like, oh, it was stolen from her. It's like, no, it wasn't. The majority of French people didn't want her. They didn't want her party. That system enables the majority to get what they want. America, Canada, I'm not as familiar with Australia, but I believe Australia.
It's a bit different, but I think it would have been interesting to see Australia's election if it had happened before Canada's, because I think the reaction to Canada's, it did influence participation. Let's we don't have that much time left, but I wanted to go over the Harvard stuff. Two things. I mentioned it before, but one, the endowment tax, essentially stripping away that tax-free status, and then two, limiting international students, which probably drive for most universities like 40 to 50% of revenue, maybe more. Like at schools like UBC.
I don't think that's as relevant here because that's not how their tuition system works. But yeah, like international, I don't think.
No, they have to pay more.
Is international tuition at Harvard higher than local tuition?
Dude, in the States, they have out-of-state tuition
too. No, but like I thought Harvard wasn't like that.
I'm pretty sure all American schools are like that. There's people that will consider not going to Oregon and they're living in Washington because it's like $5,000-$10,000 more. Like the States has a wild education system. First of all, this is random, but they do it in quarters, which I think is pretty stupid. Like you literally learn something for like a month and a half and then you move on to the next course. But anyways, it is a material effect. The international students do pay more. You can look it up.
No, it's the same. You're wrong. I just looked it up. It doesn't apply to these private institutions the same way it does to these federal or these state-run or universities. So it's the same.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to
I saw this other interesting, I was reading this today about how, so obviously, I think we wrote about it a few weeks ago as well, on like how obviously they have these big endowments, but they can't like readily tap them, right? There's like quite big restrictions on how they spend, like the donors put restrictions on how they spend it. You can't just like plow the endowment into like general spending. But I was reading that basically a lot of these like Princeton, Harvard are now like basically selling off their private equity, like they're selling their private equity exposure now in advance because they anticipate like their liquidity is going to get worse over the next like the rest of the Trump administration, and so now is like a great time to buy private equity secondaries essentially, because like all these endowment funds are dumping VC and PE exposure. So like it's interesting. It's like a second order effect of like something totally unintended and random, but like
for those who don't know what he's talking about, the Ivy League schools, they have their endowments, so they invest this money to keep their institutions going, and they have a lot of money. Like Harvard has like $50-60 billion or something, and a lot of that money is invested into private equity funds. So it's not publicly traded stock, so you can't just sell it. You can't just find a buyer snap of a finger because it's illiquid, right? It's like owning a private company. So the way that they exit these positions is they sell them ahead of time on like this private, in essence, a private market. They go to a bunch of people, see if someone will buy it. But generally, you're going to sell it at a discount. And it's a huge pain in the ass to sell. So, I mean, if they're selling a lot of them, it's a big signal. That's really interesting. I didn't know that they were doing that. I think this whole like it's kind of ridiculous that they're doing what they're doing. Like I really don't.
It concerns me from the standpoint that American education has always been at the forefront of secondary education, and
Andrew, do you have anything to say against that?
No comment.
Well, I guess 2 schools in
no
England,
comment.
but the takeaways from like the research and the funding from that is concerning. I don't know why they're doing that. It's honestly going to probably put those universities or institutions at a lower standing. It's going to destroy like academic research for like the next 4 years. They're doing everything they can, like on the education front, to make American education worse.
Yeah, they're owning the libs though. That's the main thing. So
Yeah.
Chinese AI may be better than
Listen,
American
that
in 10
that
years' time,
girl
but the
who
libs
was
have been owned.
Asian, well, that one girl who was from, I think, Korea, who protested against Israel. We got her. She's gone.
Yeah, she's gone.
Problem solved.
It's kind of crazy. Like I feel like they had a huge opportunity to really win over moderates by being more precise in like what they focused on, but instead they just like they went nuclear. They did everything to the
The only
extreme.
person that seems level-headed to me is Basent. Like whenever you
Yeah,
hear
he's
Lutnick,
super smart. Basen
yeah,
is super
no,
smart.
he's super smart. Whenever you hear Lutnick talk, he sounds like a New York deli like salesman or
Yeah.
whatever. He seems erratic.
To Wastq's, I don't know how to say it, Wasted Q123's comment. So here's what I'll say. I do agree that academia is fraught with waste, right? I always comment about how I think Canada should stop funding half of the social sciences, like as much as they do, and like really plow it into like, I know it's crazy, whatever, but like math, computer science, engineering, STEM. I really think it should be plowed into STEM because I read some of these research papers that are done. Like we read a lot of papers for our videos, and some of the stuff you just read it and you're like, this is like a fifth grader. Like, yeah, it sounds really fancy and it's really long and nice, and you have this degree, but you're not saying anything of substance and you're not really studying anything of substance. But there is a lot of great research, WASQ123, that's coming out of these institutions related to medicine, related to engineering, like that sort of stuff is going to take a huge hit. And apparently a ton of professors are super worried because they're doing these studies that are, time is really important. Like maybe they only have such a narrow window to do something. The one thing that I wish some administration would do is get rid of legacy admissions to these schools. Like if I come back to Steve Bannon, right? Like his whole thing is populism. The main issue with the Ivy Leagues is not about race, it's about income. And like I think what's been the greatest failure of politics in America, and I don't agree with Bernie Sanders on a lot of stuff, but he's been very consistent. They try to separate people on like identity instead of separating them and saying like, look, working class people may be struggling. And I empathize with that. And so when we look at Harvard, we look at Princeton, here are some like crazy statistics. 70% of people who go to Harvard and Princeton come from families with a median income of almost $200,000. Okay. That doesn't mean that they work and make 200. That could also mean people with passive income and make 200,000 or much richer. The top 1% income earners, it's like 30% of Harvard and Princeton come from families that make over $700,000 a year. Like, and then the bottom 20% is less than, I think, 10% of the Harvard, Princeton population. That is what they should be focusing on. And if you're a legacy student, you're 6 times as likely to get admitted into Harvard and Princeton or any Ivy League than you are as a regular student. Why isn't that what they're focused on?
Are you saying Mark Carney's daughter didn't get into Harvard because she's smart?
I don't know. Like I can't comment on Mark Carney. Like, Mark
Obama.
Yeah, Mark's super smart, but like Obama, like no hate against his daughters. But do I think his daughters got it on merit? I don't know. Like probably not. Like do I think it helped that he's an Obama or that they were Obamas? Like like you see, and the international students, these international students that are coming, they're loaded. Like most international students at Ivy League schools are rich.
Well,
and that's not a bad thing, but it's like this whole thing about, we want to stop these people who have views that are incongruent with the US. It doesn't work because the people who are coming here are very liberal international people. These are people whose families have yachts. Like they're not people who are coming from the desert espousing strong religious ideology that's against your country. These are people who have benefited from your views. So like, it's just like you're targeting the wrong people. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, fully agree. We're close to 60 minutes now. Do you guys want to service some questions or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any questions in the chat, we can take them. Otherwise,
There was one posed to me about Poland, but I think Aman, did you plan to do something on Poland before? Maybe you can answer Poland better than I can.
honestly,
On,
I
on the
can't.
Polish
Why do you
economy.
think Poland seems strong from a GDP standpoint? Like, I can take a guess, and then maybe you can take a guess. Like, my guess of why Poland is doing better, it's easier to go from garbage to not so garbage than it is to go from super rich to even super rich. Like I think it's that this is the fundamental problem. Like Poland was much lower starting base. They had a lot more room to grow into, low labor cost, really leaned into technology and outsourcing and education, and that drove their economy because a lot of money started flowing in there, a lot of talent there, low cost talent. Like I've had businesses that have outsourced to Poland for engineering, and they're incredible engineers. Same with Ukraine. The UK, super rich country, basically got rich off of financialization of their economy. What more can you do? Like, I don't know. What can you do? Like,
Yeah, I think Poland also benefited from what the Baltics benefited from, right? Which is that if you think about like the shock of like the collapse of the kind of Eastern Bloc in the 90s, these countries all benefited from essentially joining the EU, and then joining this like large single market and having these like pretty accountable, transparent institutions, and not going down the path of Russia, which if you read the Bill Browder books, but you don't have this kind of crony capitalism, and you didn't see like the Polish state and its assets getting cut up into
very good
pieces and
point.
sold off to random oligarchs. You had a much more kind of efficient privatization and market process there, which is why you see Poland is like far better off than Ukraine, which never made it into the EU, into that kind of like Western governance style, right? So I think that's another thing they've been. And obviously being in the EU, you have that convergence effect of just being in the EU, right? Polish workers can go to the UK or to France, Germany, whatever, work, send money back. There's that kind of like.
Well, not even just that. It's like it's easy to do business with Poland. If you're an EU country, it's almost like, this is going to sound bad, but it's almost like Poland is like India for Europe, is almost how I think about it sometimes. It's obviously not the same sort of level, but like a part of it is really that. And now they're becoming obviously a lot richer. But that's a really, really good point. Like, when you're part of the EU, you're kind of forced to fix your house, get your affairs in order. Otherwise, you can't be part of it.
I mean,
Turkey is technically part of the EU, right?
Or no, Turkey's it's not part of the EU. They've had like a long running kind of like, will they be a candidate or not? But they haven't.
Yeah,
like Turkey's accession to the EU has been a big driving factor in a lot of the like nationalist movements you see, because people are more or less racist against people from Turkey. So it's a big like thorn in the side of like EU expansion.
Yeah, totally.
You still get like countries in the EU that do horribly. Greece in 2010 or 2012 crisis. But no, I agree with both of you. Some people are talking about affirmative action. Do we want to jump into that, or I could give my thoughts?
Very, very dangerous topic. You can go
jump into the minefield. Go for it.
Yeah. So, as someone who is a visible minority, I am very strongly against affirmative action, and I think my brother and I share the same views. But affirmative action, in my mind, can only work if it's based off of the parents' source of income or how much they're making, their wealth. When you look at some kids, just because of the color of their skin, doesn't necessarily mean they had to struggle. There are some kids I knew at university that their parents were, essentially oligarchs or oil barons, and they were considered in that class, even though
I knew a kid whose dad owned a diamond mine. An entire diamond mine.
No, it's wild. But if you're gonna, decide to exclude brown people and Chinese people or Asian people in general, then you should just do away with that, because that does not make any sense. There are so many Chinese and Indian families in particular where they're making less than median household income in Canada or the States, but their kids, become really smart and they have access to go to Harvard or work in Silicon Valley or work in Wall Street. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. They should do away with that.
Yeah, I mean, just fundamentally, we just got to think about people as individuals. right? And do our best to like lift people up with like thoughtful policy. And that's my politically correct view.
No, at scale, it's a very nice thought. It's just done very in execution is done very poorly, and leaves out a lot of would-be candidates that have the same disadvantages. But yeah, you can be politically correct. But a few seconds ago, you were saying all sorts of dictators things.
Dictatorial things
Yeah.
every now and then. Awesome. All right. I don't think we have any other questions.
Jump in the Discord. We're chatting there every day. And sign up to the newsletter as well. But yeah, jump in the Discord. We'll talk in there.
And we're going to try to do this more. Obviously, this is new for us, so we're not great at it, but we'll get better, and hopefully our viewership will get better and closer to the views of our videos.
Well, I just think we need to do popular events.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. Live stream when something crazy happens.
Yeah. While we start off, but I appreciate everyone in here. I remember all of you. You're going to be getting lots of prizes from us in the future once we get the viewership up.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.